I often get this question, is it wrong to leave an abusive spouse when you know their behavior stems from past hurts or even mental health issues? I get this question a lot from women who have placated and enabled their husbands for years, even decades, believing they were called to do so, maybe because he was molested as a child or his father was physically abusive to him, or he has depression or OCD or anxiety or bipolar or post-traumatic stress disorder or some other diagnosis. So let's talk about this. If your husband has been the victim of abuse or has mental health or emotional problems, does that give him the right to be an abuser? Do his past issues give him a pass on financial responsibility, anger management, and the responsibilities of being a good husband or father? And if he does have a mental or emotional illness, or he carries pain from the past, whose responsibility is it to get help for that now? Friend, you may care about your husband, but you can't fix him. You can care and try to encourage him to get help for his problems, but you can't be responsible for his past hurts or even his present well-being, because only he can be responsible for that. Now, that reality may seem harsh, but the only one who can deal with their own painful childhood wounds is the person who has them. The only one who can work on their emotional or mental health or even their physical health is the person who's sick. And if that person refuses, you can't fix this for them. But refusing to do your work tells you something. So I want to make a distinction here between mental illness and foolishness and pride or even a wicked heart. You see, not everyone who's mentally ill is abusive, and not everyone who's abusive is mentally ill. Mental illness can lead to an inability to think clearly or see reality properly. It can lead to an inability to control emotions and behaviors appropriately. That might be hard for someone who's mentally ill. But most mentally ill people are not intentionally cruel, nor do they feel good about what they've done when they weren't thinking properly. Take Gina, for example. When off her medication, she would become manic, spend huge amounts of money on credit, and have sexual encounters with strangers. When she got back on her medication, she was very remorseful. She felt a lot of shame and regret. And Gina worked hard to get the help she needed so she didn't continue to cause her family grief. Yet Gina still had to experience the consequences of an $8,000 credit card bill. That didn't go away just because she was sorry. Her husband set a boundary on Gina, and he wasn't going to allow her to have any more credit cards until she was stable over a period of time. At the same time, he did feel compassion for his wife as mental illness ran in her family. Gina, too, was humble, teachable, and she was willing to accept those consequences and willing to get the help she needed. And then there's Sally, who suffers from a physical illness, diabetes. But Sally refuses to take any medication. She eats poorly, and she recently crashed into a parked car because her blood sugar was dangerously low. Her kids were in the car. Sally's problem is not diabetes, but foolishness and pride. And her husband had to place some strong boundaries around her caring for their young children so they weren't harmed by her recklessness. When you're married to someone with a mental health issue, of course you want to have compassion and some boundaries. Both are equally important. If your husband had a brain tumor that made him violent, I hope you would have compassion, but you would also need some boundaries to be safe, which may mean you can't live with him. The same might be true for someone who's mentally ill. Please hear me. Just because your spouse suffers from some type of condition or past hurt doesn't mean you throw away your marriage. But if your spouse refuses treatment and continues to be abusive or dangerous toward you and your children, boundaries and consequences are vital for your safety and your own mental health. Until next time, God bless.